Good evening, everyone. It's 7:03 p.m. It's November 26, 2024. This is a meeting of the Sherborn Zoning Board of Appeals. The meeting is open. I'd like to take a roll, attendance by roll. Mr. Labby,
Present.
Mr. Novak,
Here and apologetic for being late, but I was juggling a client call and writing a motion for you, esteemed chair.
oh, thank you. And I understand the delay. I'm just 5 minutes late all the time. And McBride present. Mr. Fitch is absent tonight. So just to continue the conversation that Paul and I were having, the first agenda item is to postpone the comprehensive permit application for Phoenix Partners Brush Hill project. And we were just discussing a date to continue that until. So Paul, I don't know if you have a particular day. I think middle of the week, I guess, works best for me. I don't have a particular day. I don't know, board members, if there's a particular day of the week you prefer.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday tend to be easier, Todd, but what works for you?
Yeah, agreed. Mondays and Fridays are a bit problematic.
Paul, any suggestions?
Tuesday the 10th is wide open for me.
Sounds good.
Okay.
That works for
December 10, yeah.
Brush Hill until the 10th.
Sounds
So,
good.
make a motion to continue the Brush Hill comprehensive permit hearing until December 10th.
Second,
Wonderful. Vote by roll. Mr. Labby,
Aye.
Mr. Novak,
aye.
McBride, aye. Thank you. Paul will continue Brush Hill permit discussion until the 10th at 7 p.m. or a little after if we have something ahead of it.
And what about Washington Street?
I guess we can reopen the hearing for Washington Street Homes LLC comprehensive permit application. I move to continue that also for the 10th.
Second,
Mr. Labby, how do you vote?
Labby, aye.
Mr. Novak,
aye.
Mr. McBride, aye. It passes. We will continue Washington Street to the 10th. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to continue the hearing of petition 2024-15, Andre Barros petition for a special permit under section 325 to operate a masonry business at 41 Perry Street in a residential B district. I think we left off last week discussing a number of potential conditions. I know we've received since our meeting last week some additional resident comments, some generally in support with conditions, some opposed. And so just before we sort of continue this hearing, I'm going to selflessly plug the need for more volunteerism on the Sherborn Zoning Board of Appeals. And so whether you like what we're doing or hate what we're doing or hate me or mildly dislike me, we would love to have more residents in town participating. There's another spot for an associate member currently, and I know Mr. Novak would probably like to exit entirely, and Mr. Fitch has sold his house and is renting right now. So we absolutely need more members of the town to participate, and you can join the rest of us in making everyone unhappy. So that being said, I'm not a good salesman, I'm a lawyer. So we would love any volunteerism to help the ZBA. So that being said, now that I have a captive audience, let's talk about sort of the potential conditions. I would like to say that I have been speaking with Chris Canny, who regrettably could not be here this evening. He had a Girl Scouts commitment that he could not escape, apparently. But he has been working with Mr. Barros the last couple weeks to sort of narrow down the scope and scale of the business operations. Mr. Canny had put together some, what I thought to be some very thoughtful conditions with respect to the use. I don't know if we want to display those on the screen if Jeannie has those available, or we want to just sort of just discuss them. I want to open up to the board, sort of see how you're feeling and what your thoughts are on how you want to take this discussion.
I can share them if Jeannie cannot, but I think it would be helpful for everybody to see them.
That's great. That's fine. Todd?
Rick, if you can't, I can. So if you want to go ahead.
Okay,
and
you,
talk.
please go ahead, ma'am. You're better at it than I am, no question.
We'll see. Can you see it? No?
Not yet.
Oh, come on, share. Let's see.
There we go. Something's
You're
happening.
there.
Loading. Got it.
Great, thanks, Gene. If you could just maybe I don't know if you could pull down that window a little bit so we can see more of the conditions at once. Maybe just move the cursor down to the bottom where like of the Zoom window and pull it down. I don't know if that.
I'm not sure that's going to work so easily.
All right. So I think Chris Canny, our building inspector, put together some pretty thoughtful conditions. I think that the conditions address concerns around the scope of the operation, environmental concerns with respect to maintenance of vehicles. I think that from an aesthetic standpoint and maintaining the look and feel of a residential neighborhood, that's also sort of addressed with respect to the screening. So I don't know if Todd or Rick, you have any particular thoughts or want to highlight anything that you think is great or not great, or that needs to be amended.
Sure. So I'll sort of chime in here. I too thought that the conditions were thoughtful in that they seemed fairly comprehensive in addressing the various matters and sensitivities specific to this item. My initial thoughts, the two areas where I have a little concern are provision, or I guess it would be bullet point 8 there, in terms of the vehicle count. I'd prefer to be more prescriptive and with regards to trucks. As it's currently written here, up to 8 trucks could be stored on the property, and I don't think that's moving in the appropriate direction based on feedback from the neighborhood and the abutters in terms of traffic. So I think we need to maybe think through that a little bit more. I recall the most recent permit that we issued. We were prescriptive in that we provided a specific limit in terms of vehicles and trailers and called them out. It wasn't just a broad count that could be applied to any permutation that the homeowner wanted to apply. And then the second item that I think might require a little bit more thought. I don't think we can see it on the screen here. Nope, I stand corrected. Sorry, my eyes are tired. Bullet point 5 with regards to essentially the shelf life of excess material and the duration for which it can be stored on the property, that of 180 days. Again, that might be something that we want to think a little bit more about. The last thing I would just point out, particularly to folks in the public here attending that haven't seen this, bullet 10 does call out the condition that there would be quarterly inspections conducted by the zoning enforcement officer, which I think would be productive in this case. And I particularly like that point in terms of accountability.
Okay, so I too applaud the efforts of all sides to try to come together here and come up with something that everybody can live with. It's definitely a thorny situation. I think I'm most troubled by the 180 days because that's hard to enforce, and there seems to be a lot of leeway there. But if Chris Canny, who's the guy who's going to enforce it, and in whom I have a lot of confidence, thinks that's feasible for him, I guess I'm willing to defer to him. It doesn't really deal with the traffic issue per se, and that continues to concern me. On the other hand, maybe a fix for that would be that we make the permit for only 1 year so that it has to come before us again in another year. And if the traffic is still just a major large irritant to the neighborhood and a problem, they will be back before us shortly, and we can revisit the issue of whether or not there should be traffic controls. But I'd also like to hear, how the general public feels about this. This is probably their first time seeing it.
Yeah, no, I'll open it up in a second. I just want to say that I also think that any permit that we would consider would be a very limited duration of 1 year to dip our toe in the water and not overcommit to whatever we're sort of granting. I think I also agree that quarterly inspections are important. I think that 180 days for storage could leave room for a much longer tail if it's quarterly visits sort of enforcing it. So I would say I'd probably lean more towards 90 days, and that way sort of Chris shouldn't probably see it twice, the same thing twice, but that's sort of my perspective. I also think, to Todd's point, that's too open-ended on the vehicle count. So I would recommend, that would be in parity with what our other approval was, which was three commercial vehicles?
3 trucks and 3 trailers.
Yeah, three vehicles licensed sort of the business, right? That was how we defined it.
Yeah.
Yeah, registered to the business. So, so I would go with my proposed edits would be 90 days on number 5, and 3 trucks, trailers, and 3 trucks and 3 trailers. And I think probably, a piece of equipment, equivalent of a piece of equipment on each, so another, piece of equipment. I don't know if you want to consider a skid steer a vehicle or call it something else, but I don't know if we need to get to that level of detail, but sort of with that, I can't really see the screen, I guess, very well with you sharing, Gene. So I want to open it up to the public, but I can't see the mosaic very well, or I'm not adept enough to adjust my screen view. So if folks want to speak, if you could just call it out, I can't seem to tell.
I see Mr. Butler had his hand raised.
Yeah, hi, this is Evan Butler here from 11 Prospect. I think I agree. Like, I think 8 trucks is quite a bit. I think I'd be much more supportive of limiting the number to what precedent was set with Mr. Ortiz's business. That's one item. I think the 180 days is far too long. That's the entire season for the year. Like, my understanding is the business is a seasonal business, and that basically means an entire year of storage. And I think also just having some sort of cap on overall materials. Like, I think the last special permit for Mr. Ortiz's business basically had no outdoor storage at all. And then I think the other things that, some of the neighbors had talked about was to make sure that if this was going to be granted, which I think there's a lot of people not in favor of, to make sure there was no dumping of any sorts, including snow, because I know that's been an issue in the past, with the business. And I think the other area I would like to understand is, or at least ensure that I don't know what authority the ZBA has, in terms of enforcement, but I think at least having proof of insurance for the vehicles and licensed drivers for the vehicles. I know there's been issues with that in the past as well. And I think when it comes to a safety issue, having unlicensed drivers or drivers with suspended licenses, or potentially vehicles operating without commercial insurance, is very dangerous and creates a real liability and risk to the not just the residents and the neighbors, but also I would imagine the town.
Yeah, Rick, I have my own sort of thoughts, but I don't know, Rick, if you have a perspective on the scope of facts that are, ripe for consideration before us with respect to these special permits, and what your perspective is on the scope of the conditions that we can enforce.
Yeah, there were some things that showed up in some of the correspondence that were more of a personal legal status nature that maybe I don't think are appropriate for our board to consider. But it does seem to me that we can legitimately say that, as we say in all of our permits, you have to comply with all other state and local requirements applicable to your operation, including insurance and licensing. And it could be that broad and it could be that fine. We're not going to send Chris Canny checking driver's licenses at the driveway, but
No, that's not his, that's obviously not his job to enforce those laws. His job is to enforce the sort of conditions on the site, but yeah, thank you, Rick, for that perspective. So I think there's a catch-all sort of compliance language that we will put in the permit with respect to Massachusetts laws and regulations, including local regulations and requirements.
Sorry, may I ask another question? This is Evan Butler again.
Yes.
I noticed in the Secretary of State, Elite Stoneworks was dissolved as a business back in July. I wasn't sure if maybe Mr. Barrows could comment on that. But one question I had more broadly for the board is, can a special permit be granted to a business that is no longer registered or no longer exists according to the state? And how does
Well, you don't need to have an LLC to have an individual, business self-employment. So I think that's, I'm a corporate lawyer, but not that type of corporate lawyer. So I'm not going to speak to that. But I think, I think you can operate as an individual with a DBA, and you don't need a specific, entity type. But that's my perspective. Rick?
I'd agree with that. I mean, a technical dissolution of Elite Stoneworks should probably be fixed, but it's not really a zoning issue. If he rolls up Elite Stoneworks and it doesn't exist anymore, and he's doing something that's completely different, Acme Landscape Supply, then he'd be out of compliance with his permit. So,
just for 1 second, guys. I closed Elite Stoneworks LLC, but I still have the DBA as Elite Stoneworks. So
perfectly fine.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
you're welcome.
Evan, do you have any other questions or comments?
Nope, that's it from me.
I see Marion has her hand raised.
All right, I just have a quick comment. I think it's good that there be regularly scheduled inspections by the building inspector just to make sure that there's compliance. But I think maybe you might stipulate that those don't have to be scheduled in advance with the owner. That is, I think the building inspector should have the ability to stop in every quarter or so unannounced, so that you get a realistic view of what's going on there.
Great. Thank you, Marion, for that suggestion. Does anyone else have any comments or feelings about this topic, or how, what we're discussing? I'm not seeing anything, so I feel like it's a motion time. Rick, I don't know if you've got something prepared. Maybe this is the motion you. Oh wait, I see Stephen Bonder's hand is raised.
Good evening, everybody. Just a quick question, if I might. My recollection is that the applicant mentioned that he had 16 vehicles registered. And he's represented that they are all registered in the town of Sherborn. So is it practical for the applicant to not have more than the 8 vehicles on his property at any one time? Since he's representing to us tonight, I think, or via this permit that he's got a condition on, that he will have no more than 8, but he's representing to the town that he principally garages 16 vehicles in the town. So I am having a little trouble.
Well, I think, yeah, first of all, you're conflating insurance principal garaging with registration. So his insurance compliance, as someone who used to deal with insurance coverage issues on this particular matter, I can tell you that, that's his own issue, and that's not something that we can regulate. That's up to his insurance company contract of insurance as to whether or not those vehicles actually have to be garaged in Sherborn versus registered here. So people can register their vehicles in Florida and keep them in Massachusetts. So, I think registration and garaging are different issues. And I think, and unfortunately, we can't limit the amount of vehicles. We have no jurisdiction to limit the amount of vehicles registered to an address. That's not our to do unless Rick feels otherwise. But
No, I agree with you completely, Zach. And the only thing minor tweak I might have is you register your car in Florida or register your car in Florida and bring it to Massachusetts, you're probably going to have an insurance problem the first time you have an accident, but that's again not our jurisdiction. I mean, if it's here all the time.
Yeah.
Instead of, yeah.
Yeah, it's based, yeah. So I think, unfortunately, I think the way that we can limit, the vehicles is just how many vehicles are parked outside, which I think at this point, by the way, Mr. Bonder, I think we're not advocating for 8 trucks. It's going to be less than that. It'll be three trucks, similar to what we did for the other petition that was decided last week.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
I think that's where we're leaning. I don't want to speak for my other board members on a motion that hasn't been made yet, but I believe that is the direction we were leaning. I see Susan's hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the list of conditions. I too find 8 vehicles to be way too many. We limited Ortiz to 3 vehicles and 2 trailers, as I recall. I see no reason whatsoever to provide room for more vehicles on this permit. If his business is such a size that doesn't work for him, then perhaps that should suggest to us that the business is too large to operate out of a residential area. So I would definitely want the board to look at that again and reduce it by half. It's too many.
Reduce what number by half, Suzanne?
The number of vehicles allowed on the property at any given time.
Right, so half of what? So I'm just looking for, I just want to.
Well, right now it reads, right now it reads 8. I would go with 3, just like you did with Ortiz, 3 trucks and 2 trailers maximum at any given time on the property. Okay. If that doesn't work, then that tells me that the business is too large for a residential area.
I think that's sort of correct, and that's in line with what we're thinking. And I think, Rick, if you're about to make a motion, I think the way that I would refine my consideration from our previous special permit would be basically license any registered vehicle. I don't know if a trailer is considered a vehicle, but I know it requires registration. So I think we should limit the number of registered vehicles to the business as the way I would describe it. But I think that's because I think maybe it's them sort of keeping Chris Canny's or any combination thereof. I don't know, if I don't know. And Mr. Barros, do you have a lot of trailers? Do you use are trailers an issue for you? Like what, I know you probably, I've seen one around, I've seen, you have at least one like covered enclosed trailer I've seen, I think, but I don't know what else you have, so.
So I do have a couple. They're generally on sites. They don't usually come back to the house. Occasionally they do, but most of the time they're on sites. They carry tools, right? They're little small utility trailers. So that's yeah.
Are they
There's a
enclosed
couple.
or are they open deck?
They're enclosed. They're enclosed.
Do you have any open deck trailers or how do you transport the skid steers?
I do have one.
You have one open deck trailer?
I do.
Do
How
do
many
you
trailers?
always transport this? Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. How many trailers do you have total?
Total, I have 3 closed and 1 open.
And they're all registered in Massachusetts to the address.
They're all registered, correct?
Todd, you were speaking.
Yeah, just in the vein of traffic, Mr. Barros, for the multiple skid steers that we saw in the photos in our last meeting, are you let me phrase this properly, are the company vehicles and trailers the sole source of transportation for those skid steers to and from job sites? Or is your transportation outsourced for those machines?
No, well, I transferred all of it. It's not even at the house anymore. All of it's already been moved for the season.
Okay, but in season, if the skid steers are there and they need to be moved to a site, you'd be moving them with one of your own trailers with one of your own trucks.
Correct.
Okay. I asked because if it were a third party that handles your transportation, granted, skid steers are not very large equipment, right? But
No.
excavators, sometimes they would outsource that. I just wanted to be clear and on the record with that, with regards to that matter.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, you're on mute, Rick. All right, at least I can't hear you. I don't.
Okay, sorry, try that. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like you were in your incredibly gracious yet manipulative way.
You're really muffled, Rick.
Bring it
I don't
up
know.
again. Yeah, all right.
Suzanne, actually, so Rick, I see Suzanne's hand is up, so I'm gonna go to her for 1 second, if that's okay, and then
Please.
if you could continue. Yeah.
Thank you. Just one other question I have, I guess, for the board. Just wondering roughly, do you guys know how many of these permits are issued to operate businesses out of residential areas in the town? And of those businesses, how do they compare in size and scale to Mr. Barros's business? Is this typical? Do you normally allow a business of this size to run out of a residential area, or will this be far and away the largest business run out of a residential area in Sherborn?
I don't know how many Rick's raising his hand. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, I'll take a shot at that one. If Suzanne won't hold me to being 100% accurate, because I'm speculating a little bit. My sense is there are 4 or 5 of those around town, because when I was talking with Chris Canyon, trying to get my arms around how we could be fair to this guy, but other people who held them. There's the one we just gave on Western. Skip Smith, I think, has one over on Coolidge Street. There's this one, and I think there might be a couple others, but you know, there aren't 15 of them, Suzanne, and there aren't 2. It's probably on the order of 4 or 5. And it's, again, my subjective understanding, this is pretty much the biggest by a pretty fair amount. And Zach, I don't know if you or Todd see it differently, and Jeannie and Chris Kenny would know, and he's not on.
I don't have the data or statistics in front of me to speak to that.
Jeannie?
No, I don't know. I know that you know, this is, I think, the largest that I've seen in my 2.5 years on the board. This is probably only the 4th one total. I think one was a yoga studio, one was behind Fireside. You know, not many. I think there's been a couple, but not many. So, and I think there's also, I'll stop there.
So what you're saying is that this business, should you approve it to run in the residential area, would be far and away the biggest business to run out of a residential area in Sherborn.
I think we're making the assumption biggest based on the number of vehicles. I don't know how you're measuring size. We haven't discussed revenue. We haven't discussed, usually in my world, we discuss size of a business by revenue and employees. I
Well-
think that the number of vehicles he has registered to him is large compared to the other ones, but I think the practical effect will be the same. So,
Well,
I don't
I
know.
would think for the purpose of this permit and the issues that are, that are sort of delaying it are related to traffic. So from my perspective, the size of the business can, I would think, be assessed by number of commercial vehicles attached to the business and how many employees are coming and going every day. I understand only one employee can work there at a time, but if there's 40 employees, there's potentially 40 cars coming every day, 2-3 times a day. So from my perspective, it seems that to assess the size of a business and whether it's appropriate for a residential area, we should look at how many commercial vehicles and how many employees. And
Can I-
it's like,
excuse me?
maybe
Hold
I've
on.
misunderstood, but it sounds like this business has far more vehicles and far more employees than any other residential-based businesses in Sherborn.
I would say that I don't know that I can make that conclusion, but that's your opinion, and that's fine for you to have that opinion. I don't think we have the facts to state that unequivocally. I think that the applicant would like to comment, and then I think that Mr. Novak would like to comment.
I can just make this really simple for you guys. If you'd like, we can install a camera in front of the yard and you guys can monitor for a month or 2 months and see how many cars are coming in and leaving. And then you guys can have an actual count of what comes in and what comes out, and Chris can verify it and come by whenever he wants.
I think appreciate the offer. I think that I think from a precedent setting standpoint, I'm going to decline that's open to the public. That's not going to be a condition I'm going to impose. If you want to retain those recordings for the sake of showing Chris, that probably would be a good idea.
Sure.
But I think that's something that, you should, create and gather your own, evidence of what you're doing to comply with whatever may be granted. So,
Sure.
Rick.
Yeah, so I second Zach's idea that self-monitoring is also very protective, because if someone says there are 100 cars coming in there a day, you say, well, I've got here's the tape, and it's 5 or whatever it is. I do not agree, Suzanne, that it would be fair to characterize it, or for the board to characterize it as among the largest or the largest. It's certainly going to be among the larger such businesses permitted in the residential zone, if you include all of them, and a lot of them aren't landscaping businesses. The landscaping business beside Fireside is quite big, but it's in a different zone. So that's apples and oranges. It's not a fair comparison, because that's allowed in that zone. It's not this type of special permit.
Oh, Jeannie.
I think Addie Mae made a good point that we have many farms around town that have a lot more vehicles that come in and out, whether it's tractor trailers, whether it's farm vehicles, whether it's just people coming to, and I know it's a different deal. I understand that, but it still causes traffic, and it's still a business that's being run. And you can put conditions on this petition that 3 trailers, 3 trucks, and you can't have 15 people working 3 trailers and 3 trucks.
Yeah.
So that's
I was gonna.
And we have had other businesses in the past. We've had backhoe businesses. We've had larger landscape businesses. I mean, this is not something that's highly unusual.
Yeah, I would understand. I censored myself earlier, but I did want to say that about the farm, the agricultural sort of exemptions and the large vehicles and the traffic that can happen there as well. Not that we should be adding unnecessarily, but I think the point being is that in a town like Sherborn, I don't think that it is substantially causing a substantial detriment, more so than what it sort of exists. I think that's the point of limiting the number of vehicles and the scope of activities. I definitely hear your concerns, Suzanne. I think we are balancing, obviously, the concerns, perspectives you represent, with the ability of homeowners to earn a living on their own property. And I think that, like in any negotiation, a good negotiation means everyone walks away unhappy. So I think that's where we're going to be tonight, on some level. So Rick, I think you have some thoughts, and I would like to hear them.
No, I was just going to, because you were so subtly asking me to make a motion, I was going to yield to your incredible unbending will.
Thank you very much.
If you would like. All right, I move that we approve the petition with the conditions circulated by Jeannie Guthrie, that written up by with the 10 conditions written up by Chris Canny and circulated by Jeannie Guthrie, with the following changes. In number 5, the storage period is 90 days, not 180 days. The overnight parking of registered vehicles should be limited to a total of 3 trucks and 4 trailers, if I heard correctly. No snow dumping, that would be new. And 1-year term, and that another condition would be that it be operated in compliance with all applicable state and local insurance and licensing requirements. That's my motion.
And could we add number 10? I don't know if we have to add unannounced. It doesn't say planned or announced visits, but
good add.
Mary's point, I think I just want
with
to
or without prior notice.
Yeah.
Seconded.
Wonderful. Vote by roll. Mr. Labby,
Labby, aye.
Mr. Novak,
Novak, aye.
Ms. McBride, aye. Mr. Barrows, congratulations. The board has granted you a special permit to operate elite masonry. Masonry or stoneworks? Sorry.
It's Stoneworks.
Elite stoneworks. It'll be a 1-year permit. We will get a letter out to you in a week or two. Bear with me, I'm a little behind in a bunch of things, so we will get it out to you soon. And we will see you in hopefully less than a year, a little bit less than a year.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
To all the residents who are displeased, I hope that you feel that this is an appropriate compromise, but of course, stay in communication. If there are things that you find that are not in compliance or are concerning, please continue to let the board know. And, we will address this in a very short time, because a year goes by faster every year. So that being said, I think we have a continuation of the public hearing for 41 North Main Street, comprehensive permit for a 40B development.
You have a hand up, sir, Mr. McBride.
Oh, Mr. Butler.
Sorry, just one other question. So if there is just non-compliance, just so I'm clear, is that just automatic revocation? Is there a grace period? How does the
You should definitely, if there's things that you feel are not in compliance, please communicate to Gene and to the board, and and to Chris Canny, he's the enforcement officer. So obviously, our awareness is important as well as his awareness, and that's the path forward.
Okay, and will the I guess stipulations of the permit be made public through the website, or? Okay.
Yes, Rick.
Thank you.
It'll be recorded. And the thing you should do if you're unhappy or think he's out of compliance is go to Chris Canny, because that's your first step. Ask him to enforce the zoning bylaw and the permit, and he'll either issue a cease and desist letter or he won't. And if he does not, you can appeal to us. And if he does, Mr. Barrows can appeal to us.
Thank you.
But obviously, I just want to say, obviously this is a, sort of a contentious one. So, please, keep the board informed as to how this is going, because we will be back here in a year. So, okay, so to continue with 41 North Main, there's been a bit of activity since the last time we met. I believe the Board of Health has provided a very comprehensive sort of assessment from their perspective of water supply and septic. And we've had some additional neighbor comments and butter letters come in as well. So applicant team, I don't know if there's anything in particular you would hope to address this evening from a topical perspective, to sort of get what you would like to talk about first, and then I'll defer to my board to see where they would like to go.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Paul Haverty, Blattman, Bobrowski, Haverty, and Silverstein. Representing the applicant with me tonight is Mike Fabiano and Danelle Baptiste, our civil engineers. I know that we have done some additional testing as it relates to stormwater, and Michael was ready to present that tonight. If we can begin with that, please.
That's great. Michael?
Thank you, Paul. Mike Fabiano with High Point Engineering, Paul said with the civil engineers of record for the project. So the update is last week we were successful on entering the site, conducting a almost full day of soil evaluations for the purposes of stormwater. So we did soil evaluations in at least 2, if not 3 locations, possibly 4 locations. We're in the process of analyzing that data, testing that data against the preliminary designs that were in place for stormwater operations. I'm preparing a technical memo for submission to the board, which I think it was Tetra Tech that was going to be the peer reviewer, but correct me if I'm wrong. So our expectation is that by the end of next week, we'll have a full evaluation of current and up-to-date soil evaluation for the site with respect to stormwater. We will be in a position to evaluate the stormwater, the soil evaluations for those locations, prepare a technical memo that is with respect to the stormwater designs as provided in the prior submissions, and be able to submit that to the board for review by the end of next week at its latest, if not earlier.
Wonderful. Thank you. Board, Paul, is there anything,
No, I was going to move on to the next. So if there's questions on the stormwater, we can take that first.
board members, any particular questions for Mr. Fabiano?
I would just want to hear what Tetra Tech thinks of the stormwater, and I imagine the answer is it's not in front of them yet. So,
Steve?
That is correct. There was essentially nothing to review. We tried to make some comments based on the conceptual locations of the basins, but there was really nothing in the submission that we could kind of review it against. So
right.
well, looking to get that memo, and we can certainly dive in once we get that information.
We'll say that there wasn't any major surprises. It's a refinement of data and analysis that's happening, but from prior soil evaluations that were conducted by Alan Major, which is the prior engineer, the current soil testing is consistent with what was done in the past. It just so happens that it's now in new locations that's specific to the new design location. So there is a refinement, and we're making those refinements and going to be noted in both plan and narrative.
Great.
Thank you.
Paul, next topic.
Well, the next topic I would suggest we discuss is the septic system. So we have had internal discussions. We have reviewed the letter from the Board of Health. I know that Mike has reached out to the DEP for clarification on the nitrogen loading issue, and we're still waiting for a response from them. And then as it relates to test pits for the septic system, we have had discussions, and what we're willing to do is move forward and have reviewed test pits conducted with the Board of Health so that we can get that soil information as it relates to the location of the septic system. I do know that that is going to take a little bit of time, and I think that the hearing is scheduled to close on December 9th. So we would be willing to grant an extension to January 9th, to provide enough time for that, the test pits to be taken, the information to be provided, and for your peer review consultant to have responded.
On the septic, Paul, and I appreciate the willingness of the team to go down that path. I think that's you're hearing what the board is asking, which is more information. I think that's important. I think there's just one thing, conceptually, I want to make sure, we're not wasting, your time, as I saw that there was at least one, aspect of the analysis and then a comment as well. And it's something I picked up as well, just the potential sort of impossibility of the amount of gallons per day, given the size of the project and Title 5 acres. And I don't know if that, if you understand what I'm saying, but it seems like there's no possibility that this system can accommodate the size of development. And so unless I'm misreading something or my board members have a different perspective there, I just want to sort of address that.
Sure, but I will say that relates to the nitrogen loading issue that I had just discussed. We have reached out to the DEP for clarification on that. We don't believe that we are subject to that nitrogen loading restriction, but we are seeking guidance from the DEP to clarify that.
Okay. I thought it was just 200 gallons a day per bedroom, but that was my Greenwood.
It was 110.
question. 100 a day or 200 a day?
Well, it was 110 per bedroom per Title 5 acre.
Thank you, Todd, for correcting me. So I guess I just want to make sure that my understanding of the math works out from a density perspective, and in case, I just want to make sure that we're not wasting your time, or if there's an opportunity to sort of adjust that, we're discussing a showstopper potentially.
Sure, and again, we believe that we're not subject to that nitrogen loading restriction. That being said, we are awaiting feedback from DEP. Mike, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on this or not.
I think it's probably better to wait to get clarification from the DEP. I mean, the issue is about the IWPA and whether or not that well was dissolved or not, and it actually is a public water source compared to a domestic source. The statements in the Board of Health are true in so much that if there is an IWPA well, there is a restrictive distance away from that public water source. And the second category is that there is a well source that's on site along with septic, then it's also nitrogen sensitive. But records that we see online suggest that IWPA or that public water source has been dissolved, and that there's only a domestic well source on site and not a public water supply source. So that's a clarification that we're seeking, and there's only so much records that we can research online without getting a formal conclusive determination by the DEP stating as such.
Board members, any questions, comments, concerns? Rick,
You're on mute.
you're on mute.
Maybe this is premature, but I want to toss it out there because there's an elephant in the room. There's several elephants in the room. And the biggest elephant in the room is well water supply. And if there isn't any well water, there's no project. And the lack of well water killed the project last time. And there's been no progress on that. So in terms of wasting everybody's time, I wonder if we all might be better off saying, okay, that's a showstopper, and the show stops. And we send it back up to, and I've got a motion right here to send it right back to deny it for cause, send it right back up to HAC and ask HAC to remand it to us with directions to the development crew to respond to our reasonable requests on water, sewer, and traffic. And then we can stop the dancing.
Mr. Novak, what are your remaining concerns on traffic from the last presentation? If you could just.
Sure, sure. They have given us no information at all on its permit feasibility, whether they have any permits, whether they've talked with any of the numerous engineering agencies, whether they've got any permits, how they plan to pay for it. We knew they drew some nice lines on the ground that looked pretty good to me. I'm not a traffic engineer, but the Vanass people are good. And the Vanass people said it costs, roughly $750,000. And it sounds like the proposal is, well, that money will fall out of the sky somewhere. And I'm not sure that's necessarily, given the safety implications of traffic, the right thing for us to be approving. Likewise, on the septic system, if, it's good that they're doing a little bit. This needs a full evaluation, groundwater mounding, what happens to the well for the restaurant next door. This is not a cookie cutter, and it's not easy, and it's brand new to the project. The last project had a wastewater treatment plant. So I guess what I'm a little frustrated about is I want to ask the development team, listen, are you serious about this? You're going to make a serious proposal and give us the information that we're entitled to get, or are we going to dance? And if we're going to dance, that's not illegal, immoral, or fattening, but we'll kick it out.
Might I respond, Mr. Chairman?
Of course.
As it relates to the water supply, I'm curious what the local rule or requirement is that would require us to provide more information than what we have already provided. My understanding is the testing that was done was more than double the length of the required testing. So why would we be required to provide you more information than that?
Our local board.
Because I think, quite simply, from my non-involved understanding, the peer reviewer very clearly wrote that additional testing was recommended due to drawdowns, and that hasn't been done. So I think that's one element, at least for me, on the first round that I saw from my desk review. But I know Rick has more color.
Yeah, Paul, I went through all of the Board of Health regulations today. And just writing down my own, I got a list of like 6 already that you either need waived or you got to show it. And one of them is that there's an adequate water supply. So if you think you meet all of our Board of Health requirements and don't need a waiver, okay. But what I thought I've been hearing from you is, go to heck, we don't have to do anything with you guys.
And again,
Which
that is not the response that we have been providing, but we have stated that we are going to do the information that is required by your local rules and regulations. If you can point to a local rule or regulation that specifically requires a testing period longer than the information that we provided, then that will change my opinion on this. Lacking that, what you're looking to do is subject a 40B development to rules and requirements above and beyond that which non-subsidized housing is subjected to in Sherborn, and that's not allowed.
Okay, so give us a written proposal. Here's my reasonable request for detailed information on exactly how you meet each and every one of the Sherborn Board of Health testing requirements. It's just a table, list them out. Requirement met, requirement met, requirement met. It's that easy.
Mike, is that something we can provide?
Well, is met now or will be met? I mean, is it a condition of approval, or is it a condition of approval that we have to show before, a zoning board proceeding?
I think, yeah, so I think, is it met now? So I think that if it's not met now, then, we're gonna have a hard time approving this absent more information is basically where I'm at. So.
I think that that's fair. We can certainly provide a written response detailing what information has been provided and whether or not it's compliant with your local rules and requirements.
Yeah, I mean, look, Paul, you're an attorney. I think, one of the best lessons I had was, you got to give the partner a 1-pager for the 5-minute cab ride to the hearing, and he has no information. So I think that's what we need. We need the gap analysis to know what it is that we don't, what it is that we need to focus on and how much risk we think we can take as a board with with a lack of information. So that's that's the roadmap we need, because right now it feels like we've got big gaps. And so I think we need you to help us understand if there's not so big gaps.
Certainly.
So Daryl, I see your hand's been raised. If you have a comment.
Yes. First, I have a question. So is the project intending to develop the well as a public water supply, given the number of people to be served? Which, by the
Right.
designs presented thus far, it appears to be over 25 people per day.
Mike, you can
My
answer this, but I
understanding
believe,
is, and maybe Gary can offer his opinion, because we're not involved with the actual well development, but my understanding is that the well service that is being developed offsite from the locus will be a public water supply and will go through all the necessary, local and DEP stipulations for permitting and development as a public water supply, and an IWPA well source is required to do so. But is not located on the premise.
That is my understanding as well.
Yes, but it's water supply for residences is the first thing that must be proven for any project. Frankly, that kind of work usually gets done because it could affect where the septic system is located. If wells are dug and there's not a sufficient water supply where they are done, the flexibility has to remain for the property that you can move that and find the appropriate water supply, which could be right where the septic had been intended. So that is pretty important to do first. I will say that the work that's been done thus far for the Board of Health, it was not observed by the Board of Health. So that's something that I'm glad that you're going to pursue the subsurface soil investigations with the Board of Health, because that'll be key to trying to have a Title V compliant system. But the Board of Health didn't have the opportunity to observe the well testing. So far we have nothing that we would go on if need be.
Thank you, Daryl. I think Rick, what is your perspective on this? We give them another month to give us.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would. I mean, I think we need to be clear that if we don't get really good information on the well and the septic and the traffic, which were the three things that was remanded for, we're going to throw it out. And I think we're sending that signal pretty clearly. But on the other hand, if they do provide it, as Paul says, the facts are what they are. Let's read the regulations against what they're providing, and do they have it or they don't, and just write it all down and check it through.
Yeah. And just remember that if we happen to approve this project, Paul, you're going to be first on my speed dial when the residents come knocking. So
Paul screens.
I know he never answers my calls.
honestly, Mr. Chairman, if you're calling my office, I'm there about once a week. So that it might be easier to get me on my cell phone.
No, I joke. I don't know that everyone will be displeased anyway. I'm just joking. So for the sake of the record, I think that everyone has concerns about health and safety, and if those concerns are resolved, then I don't think folks are as concerned. So
Can I ask if Board Member Novak can just provide me with just a couple sentences in terms of the information he's looking for regarding the traffic, so that I can forward it to our traffic engineer?
yeah,
Sure.
Go ahead, Rick.
It's pretty easy, which is show us feasibility, permit progress, and financing. And the answer may be, if the answer on financing is, hey, we have the money, it's in our budget. Okay, that's the answer. And if the answer on permit feasibility is we applied to the State Highways Office this day and this day and this day, and we're in discussions with Sean Colleen about how it works, is it the town road, even though it's state numbered, and here's where we are, great, that's useful to know. And if the answer is, guess what? If the state engineers and our engineers agree that this is a fine layout, that's helpful to know. But right now, it's just a wish on a piece of paper. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think obviously, Paul, we just want to make sure that, we're obviously not missing some critical aspect that we would condition if we knew, right? I think that is where we're going. And so,
So we're really just looking at a narrative of what it will take to get the roadway improvements constructed.
yeah, feasibility.
And where you are in that narrative.
Sure.
Are you at step 1 or step 500?
I think a project plan for the permitting, especially if utility poles have to be moved and all the utility, like I know there's a huge Eversource nightmarish lead time. So I think just, some sort of project plan for that, even high level would be helpful. I see there's a bunch of hands raised. And so I'm just, Rick, if I want to just finish the thoughts between you and Paul here on those items before we go to comment. So besides traffic and sort of the, local regulation gap analysis that you've asked for, is there anything else?
Well, I think our biggest issue is always going to be the water and who has to test when and how much and monitored by whom. And it sounds like the last time it was discussed, we were at loggerheads on that. And that's why I'm not optimistic about coming out of the process with a permit we can work with. But it is what it is. And we're not through the process yet. On the traffic, I want to hear what Sean has to say. If Sean says, hey, guess what? We've been working this for a year. We're 99% there. The backhoe's coming in the morning. That's a big deal if he says that. But I'd want to hear it from him.
On the water, just quickly on the water, was there quality testing when the original testing, Paul, for any of the, verboten substances that are in the, Sherborn local regulations, and then, also for PFAS and things of that nature, because it's been found downtown. So I just didn't know if there's any water quality waivers you'd be seeking, if you even know if you need them.
I don't. I would have to go back and look at the information from that testing.
Okay.
It's been quite a while since we went over that.
Okay. Yeah, I think on the water too, besides obviously the supply, I think that I think we want to address the quality, particularly since PFAS was detected downtown. And there's other, manganese, I think, is also problematic and other things. So a proposal on how you might assess and address, even if you don't know what the issues is you're addressing, right? Just this is how we're gonna assess and address. So Tom, I think your hand's been up for a while, so I apologize and thank you for your patience.
Not a problem, thank you. But if we could circle back to Mike's comments about the question, if there's a public well next door to the property on the Fireside Tavern site. I mean, if you go to today, the Mass DEP well database, it's public water supply ID 3269024. It's been there for decades, and you will find it in Mass Mapper. You will find the interim wellhead protection area radius. By my measurement, it's about 490 feet, and it extends well into the property that's proposed for development. So it is fairly high in PFAS, as most of our public wells that are along North Main Street and South Main Street. So I think that public well exists, and I hope this board can do what it can to protect that well from what looks like a very large septic system in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I don't know who is first, but Sean, you're on the left of my screen, so I'm gonna ask you ask you to speak before Michael.
My comment's a little aged because it was a few minutes ago, but the question was raised of what information to bring. Tetra Tech has they responded to both stormwater, wastewater as well, but I'll speak to stormwater and traffic. And there wasn't enough information. The traffic, they cited 2016 data. You obviously can't use that. There's no relevant recent data for the traffic study. And the stormwater, regardless of what Tetra Tech put they showed up tonight stating that they did soil tests, so that's kind of useless. I don't know that much is going to change inside of a month, because when is the data going to get to the peer reviewer so we can have a response? You probably ought to ask Tetra Tech when they can respond, if they're actually going to get anything to respond to.
Steve, any thoughts there?
I mean, I'll have to see what the submission looks like. It's, I really couldn't say at this time. You know, once we get the submission, we can certainly nail down a date, but, you know, we'll do our best to get things in an expedient manner, but, you know, it's certainly, you know, it's really dependent on what the submission is.
Michael Lesser.
Sure. Michael Lesser, 54 Forest Street. My first one is just as a resident of a little follow-up with Sean. I mean, there was a whole list of stuff that the peer review came up for the traffic. It's not just simply what was agreed to earlier, that whether you want them to reply to all of Tetra Tech's items as part of dealing with traffic. And it's not only just the updated data. So that's something I think should be added to the list under traffic. Then shifting as Michael Lesser, co-chair of the Conservation Commission, right, in terms of scheduling for new information, there would have to be the issue of to what extent information needed for the water supply is going to require some permitting from the Conservation Commission, and the time that that's going to take, and how far and what they're going to actually file for, let's say, a notice of intent, both for the water supply testing as well as the issues of how they're going to get the water through the wetlands. And I don't know whether there's any issues of getting it under the railroad tracks. I've never seen whether that's just an accepted horizontal drilling ability or not. But just going through the wetlands alone is another part of a permitting that would come before the Conservation Commission, in addition to just simply the water testing itself of the wells. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I mean, I think to the extent that our peer reviewers have identified areas or gaps, I mean, we would like, you know, each of those addressed, ideally for the sake of, you know, your own goals here. Is there any other comments or questions? I think it feels like we are headed towards just continuing this hearing at the moment, but I don't know if there's anything else we need clarification on. Are there any other questions from any other residents on the call that I may not have seen hands? John Garrison.
Yeah, just a comment, which is, you know, as more or less an outside observer here, I've sat through, you know, 3 of these hearings over the last 90 days, and it seems to me I've heard the same request from this board to the applicant in each meeting, which is come back next time with some additional information that will allow us to really analyze this and make a determination. And here we are again.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure it comes as no surprise. This isn't what I would love to spend my evenings doing, but so especially asking the same question again. So point well taken and underscored. And, you know, Paul and applicant team, Mr. Levarsky, like we'd obviously like to get to the facts as soon as possible, or at least the path forward. It does feel like we've been in a bit of a stasis. I know there's been some progress, but I'd like to see more progress. So that being said, I think we will probably entertain a motion to continue this hearing to a further date. Paul, I don't know what your thoughts are, suggestions. Do we need to do an extension and a continuance? Is that where we're at?
We'll get you a written extension to January 9th so that you've got, you know, enough time to actually get this information in, process it, get a report from the peer review consultant.
can we push the extension till the end of January just for scheduling purposes? I think that would be a little bit easier for the continuation of the public hearing, but that's my thought, based on additional information, time to get to the peer reviewer, but I don't know, Rick, if you're, Todd. your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I support the idea of a longer extension. On the other hand, we're still in November here. If they get Steve Booley and his team some information, and Steve, I'm looking at you as I'm asking this question. Is there any realistic chance that you could have us a meaty response to information that you got, before Christmas? I think doing things between December 20th and January 3rd is probably really unwise. So,
Yeah, I mean, I would have to have something next week in order to get everything in prior to the holidays. Because I will probably be out for like 2 weeks around Christmas time. So, certainly we would need something next week to get a review in.
Mr. Chair and Mr. Haverty, what would the two of you think if I were to toss out an extension to January 31 and we reset our next hearing for January 9th in case there's something useful to talk about? If not, we just say the information isn't here yet and we set another date, but that way we're not asking Haverty and his team to wait too long. I think we owe them an obligation to be responsive.
Yeah, I would agree with that, except for that I am not.
Okay. Well, we cannot exist without our fearless leader, so we need to figure that out.
I'm sure you'll step in I'm sure if you want to step in so I can enjoy my skiing, that will be fine, Rick.
You're breaking up again.
I actually I could probably, the 9th is a Thursday, right? Yeah, I can't do the 9th.
And Mr. Chair, that was just a extension of the time to close the public hearing. It wasn't suggesting that we have the meeting on the 9th. If there's a day prior to that,
Yeah.
that works for you,
We
we're
could do,
open to that.
Yeah, that's the problem. I've just I've got a lot of stuff going on. If we could,
I do as well, Mr. Chairman. The first week of January, I'm out of town.
so I think realistically we're talking about probably the 15th or 16th for the next meeting. If we could do something in December, but if we're going to have a meaningful conversation with Steve's input, I don't know, that's probably the 15th.
I can do the 15th, Mr. Chairman. That's a Wednesday.
Paul,
And I'll have been retired 2 weeks.
I know it would please the chairman to no end to hold a meeting on the 14th.
Oh yes, so it'd be a wonderful birthday present for myself. That would be great.
That's my brother's birthday. A good birthday to have. Good luck for you.
Well, Mr. Labby's birthday's on Thanksgiving this year, so he can enjoy all the.
That's right. I get my least favorite meat for my birthday dinner.
Anyway, all right. So it looks like we'll do the 15th of January for the continuation. And Paul, are you in agreement? We will extend the public hearing until the 31st.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's fine. If we're not going to meet again until the 14th, I'm sorry, the 15th, we can, at that point in time, figure out where we're at. And if we need additional time, we can grant additional time then. And if not, then you'll close the public hearing on the 15th.
If you want to have another hearing in December, I can do it on the 11th or the 18th. I mean,
I hear, the input that it may be a little bit too quick of a turnaround to get you the information, get Tetra Tech to review it, submit a report. So I'm fine with putting this off until January 15th. Well, I'll give you a written extension to the 31st. I don't anticipate we'll try squeezing in another meeting between the 15th and the 31st. We're going to determine on the 15th if we're, going in the right direction or if we're in an impasse. And if we're at an impasse, you're just going to close the public hearing and vote that night. So that's fine.
Okay. Sean, your hand's up.
Yeah, I was wondering if we can get a commitment on a report to Tetra Tech, because it seems like we're just spinning our wheels. They didn't just buy this property. They've had years to do, soil testing in the back of that property, and they still have yet to give the data to Tetra Tech. So you're just backing the peer reviewer up against the wall for a response during the holidays. They could have done that months ago. So you're bending over backwards to accommodate the developer. Can we get a commitment that you're going to get something to Tetra Tech in time that the town can digest it rather than last minute?
We will definitely get something to Tetra Tech before last minute. I can't commit to a specific date because first we have to arrange for these tests to be witnessed by the Board of Health. So there's going to be some technical scheduling that we're going to have to do.
So it's not scheduled, is it?
It's not scheduled yet.
All right, then it's definitely last minute, Mr. Havity. I'm sorry. It's way last.
Well, we're continuing to January 15th. There's sufficient time to conduct those tests, get the results back, and provide information to Tetra Tech.
Mr. Chairman, can I chime in?
Yes, Mike. Go ahead.
So the testing is complete for stormwater. We are committed to submit our technical memo to Tetra Tech through the town by the end of next week, if not sooner, regarding septic system related soil testing. We're preliminary scheduled for next week, potentially on Wednesday, which that has not yet been coordinated with the Board of Health agent or, for witnessing through the Board of Health. But per phone calls we had today with our excavators, it would be next week. And then we would be following up, directly after that for additional information to Tetra Tech, probably the week after. I know Danelle Baptiste is on the call. We haven't discussed exactly how much time we would need in between the test day and turnaround for a memo and evaluation of the septic system. But this is in combination with soliciting information and feedback regarding the status of the well on the adjacent property, which I understand that the well mapper site has it as a public water supply, but the mass mapper site shows it as dissolved. So there's some conflicting information on online records as to the status of the well.
Just for my own edification, who is that well supposed to serve, or who did it ever serve? This public water supply that we're referencing?
The Fireside Inn site. To the history of the well, I'm not too sure. I don't know if Mr. Limbarski has any details as to the history of the abutting property. I'm not familiar with the site enough to know, why, or maybe, I know the domestic well has been out there for a long time regarding a public water supply. I'm not too sure.
Rick, your hand was up.
I was just gonna say, Mike, the inn and now the Fireside has been in operation there since the 80s. So I'm not sure I understand the technical dissolution of the well, but I think it's still Tom. You'd know better than I do, but I think it's being used.
Well, I know it's a well on site. There's a fact that there is a well on site. It's as to the status of the well, it's classified as public or domestic. That's the challenge we have.
Tom.
Zach, can I add something important?
Yeah.
While we were talking, I went to the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs database, and for the Fireside Tavern, Public Water Supply ID 3269024, there is sampling that was done on October 16th, 2024, and submitted into the DEP database for nitrate. So my assumption is, since they're sampling and submitting data into the DEP database, that well is still very much a public water supply. And I'd be happy to share my screen to show that data. But Mike, you certainly know the water world better than I do with regulated water supplies, but they're submitting data to the DEP.
Thank you, Tom. Daryl, one quick comment. I think we're gonna then sort of move on.
I'll just back up what Tom said
Thank you,
just
Daryl.
now. I had a feeling he was going to have the techie details at hand, so.
Wonderful. So I make a motion to continue this hearing until January 15th at 7 p.m.
Second,
Vote by roll. Mr. Labby,
Labby, aye.
Mr. Novak,
Aye.
Mr. McBride, aye. The hearing will continue until January 15th. Paul, if there's any questions about what you think we need before then, please stay in touch. Happy to work with you, communicate with the board, and try to make sure we have as a productive a meeting as possible on the 15th. Mr. Novak.
Mr. Chair, would you be willing to entertain a motion to adjourn?
I would.
I so move.
Seconded. Vote by roll. Mr. Labby,
Labby, aye.
Mr. Novak,
For the love of God, aye.
Mr. McBride, aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next time.
You all.
Happy
Okay,
Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving.
everybody.
Thanksgiving.